Good morning, all of you. Thank you for being here. Mary will invite you each to take the appropriate oath before Miss Fraser-Butlin begins asking the questions. Up to you.
Okay, we'll start this way. Please state your full name.
Kevin Thomas Roberts.
And repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely.
I do solemnly and sincerely.
And truly declare and affirm.
Truly confirm.
And truly declare and affirm.
Truly declare and confirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
The evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Please state your full name.
Marlene Elizabeth Neve.
And repeat after me. I promise by all that I hold sacred.
I promise by all that I hold sacred.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Please state your full name.
Stephen John Towsey.
And repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely.
I do solemnly, sincerely.
And truly declare and affirm.
And truly declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Please state your full name.
Dwayne Gathercole.
And repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely.
I do solemnly, sincerely.
And truly declare and affirm.
And truly declare and affirm.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. As we did yesterday, I'm going to ask each witness various questions individually, and then we'll move to a time when we discuss things more thematically. Kevin, if we can start with you. You have mild to moderate von Willebrand's disease.
Yes, that's right.
And that was diagnosed in 1984?
Probably a little bit before. It was during a tooth extraction at the primary school I was at, and it bred, and the dentist at that time recommended that I detect because it was quite a lot of bleeding. And from that, they took me to the hospital, did the test, and went, oh, by the way, you're von Willebrand's. And that's how I was found out. I believe that was 83, and near the end of 83.
And that was when you were about 12?
Yeah, 11 probably. I was 11 then, and yeah, 12 and 84, so yeah.
At that point, you were also having a lot of heavy nosebleeds?
The nosebleeds came in a little bit after that. I probably was nearer the end of 84, 85. I got prolific nosebleeds, yes.
And you then needed another tooth extraction for which you were given cryoprecipitate.
I didn't actually need another tooth extraction. After I was diagnosed with von Willebrand's, I don't think it was much more than a month afterwards. Of course, a letter through, we'd like to let you come in to have these other two wisdom teeth out. When they didn't hurt or nothing. So, being naive farmer boys, never questioned. My father never questioned, I never questioned doctors. And it's just like, in you go, boy, go and get these done. They want you in, you go and have it.
And in order to do that tooth extraction, you had cryoprecipitate before and after the operation? I
had cryoprecipitate before the operation. I remember it vividly because there's a big, horrible-looking yellow bag. I went, quite scared of that. And I was given that prior to the operation. And found out very recently that I was given 3 hits of factor VIII in 24 hours after the operation.
And that's when you believe you were infected with hepatitis C?
Yes.
Why is that?
Literally between 3-4 weeks after that operation. Wow, it hit. I was bright yellow, woke up bright yellow, unbelievably weak. So weak I could hardly lift my arms, walk, bed sweats, joint pain, like people putting glass into my joints. It's horrific. But bright yellow, very bright yellow. Even my parents, who were farmer, who normally get a cold, clip the back of your ear, get on with it, you're right, man up. They went, actually, we were quite worried about you. You looked very ill. And they took me to my GP, Dr. Caff. And even the doctor said, he does look ill. He looks quite yellow, right? Well, you better give him some blood tests. And he said, come back in a week's time and we can tell you results. We came back in, and I remember it so well. He says, oh, Mr. Roberts, your son, yeah, well, it's okay. Don't worry about it. He's having growing pains. Everyone gets it. It's growing pains. His bones are outgrowing his body. That's what the joint pain and weakness is. Drink plenty of water, but especially drink lots of Indian tonic water, and he'd be fine. Of course, left the surgery, the old man goes, swing at the lead, boy. Go on, do your chores. What's the matter with you? Everyone feels like that. That's normal. You've been just told by the doctor. It's normal.
And in 1989, you had a tonsillectomy.
Yes.
And there's some uncertainty, I think, about what treatment you received then, whether it was factor VIII or as well as DDAVP, or exactly what was given at that point.
So the tonsillectomy in July, for that first one, was, look at what we found in the record, was trialled, and it's big writing, trialled for DDAVP. I went, oh, hang on, trialled, that's the first time. I went, oh, okay. But factor VIII was on standby in case the DDAVP doesn't work. My doctors, and hematology doctors, all along have said to me, you was never given factor VIII. What could I have been? I wasn't obviously given DDAVP until 89. So that left a big hole from 84 to 89. Which is, yeah, that's my eyes. So I knew I was given factor VIII, I always remember the little balls. But that kind of proved that I was never lying. I knew I was right all along, and my own blood doctors didn't know better because of these missing records.
Can I just ask you to slow slightly with your speech? We've got some brilliant stenographers taking a full note of everything, and we just need to slow down slightly.
Sure, absolutely.
During your teenage years, can you tell us what your health was like?
Well, yeah. Shocking. I'm a farmer boy. My dad's very, very old school, tough, hard. And he expected you to do your chores because he wanted his sons to be his mirror. Understandable. I was weak. When I first went to comprehensive school, there's a cross-country run. And out of the 5 years, my first year there, I was the 4th fastest guy at running this cross-country. The second year I did it, I was 64th, and I did everything I could to push myself. Collapsed at the end of the race, panting, breathing hard, sweating profusely. Could not get enough oxygen. I just remember being so weak, and I was pushing because this was normal. To feel this way was normal. I was told by my doctors, this is normal, there's nothing wrong with you. I was bedwetting. I was so weak in the mornings, I had to put my clothes on the floor, roll out of bed, and slide my clothes on while I was on the floor, and then crawl up, go down the stairs, try and eat something for breakfast, go to school, dragging my feet, because that was normal. That was normal. That's how everyone felt in my head. This is normal to me. Brain fog, wow. Schooling, that didn't go very well for me. Didn't go very well at all because I could not remember things. I'd be given a date or a math equation, and as soon as I turned my head from the paper, I couldn't remember it. It just went. Reading stories, I could remember a story. I couldn't remember the names, the dates, even what the book was called. I felt thick, very thick, and because of that, I was treated thick. Again, I thought it was normal. I thought it was just me. I realised later it wasn't.
And how did you come to find out you'd been infected with hepatitis C?
Went on to one of the normal 3 monthly, quarterly blood tests, and got pulled in for the bloods, and something that I overlooked for many years. Every time I went there, the nurse taking the blood would step up when they see me coming, and a new nurse would come in to the little room, and she wore a mask, gloves, apron, PPE. Never thought about it until I talked to the other victims, and they'd take my bloods, and she goes, "All right, Mr. Roberts, yeah." She's always very softly spoken. Goes, "Right, here we go. Oh, I've got a few here today. Oh, 14 test tubes." I said, 14? She said, "Yeah." here we go. Oh, that's nice. 14. It's a biggish lad. So I thought I can take that. And I seen the doctor at the end to have any queries. And I said, excuse me, Dr. Kruger, his name, Dr. Kruger. And I said, what are these test tubes for? I know my vulnerability brands are haemophiliac, and I need a few test tubes for that. But 14? He goes, I know, it seems a bit excessive, doesn't it? But hang on a minute, don't you know? I know what? Well, we're not only testing you about your bloods, we're testing you because we think you might have HIV. I went, you what? He went, oh, don't worry about that. He says, you have got hepatitis C. I said, what's hepatitis C? He goes, oh, you really don't know, do you? I said, what's hepatitis C? He said, you've got a 50% chance of dying before the age of 25. You've got a 45% chance of curing it with this drug called interferon. And you've got a 5% chance of curing it yourself. Here's a little leaflet on hepatitis. And I advise you, don't drink alcohol anymore. And we'll give you your HIV results in the post in a few weeks' time. Have a good day.
And those HIV results arrived in the post.
They arrived in the post. Well, prior to that, I got to the car and I told my father what I was told by the doctor. And he said, you know, those years ago when I was really, really ill, and he was told it was normal, I was in trouble, Dad. He said, I've just been told I may not be here at 25. Dad's strong. He's not an emotional guy. He's not a very tactile person. He looked at me, went quiet. We drove home the 50 minutes it took from Truro Hospital to my home. And I couldn't hear a thing. I couldn't even hear a car running. It was both blank. Not a word was said all the way home. I got out of the car, thought I'd better tell my mum. Mum, yeah, I've got something to tell you. What's that, love? I got hepatitis C. Again, didn't know what it was. They said I might die from it. Oh, said not only that, they tested me for HIV, AIDS. She waited about 15, 20 seconds. And she looked me straight in the eye and says, if you got AIDS, I want you to leave the house. I don't want you infecting your brothers. I looked at her, never said a word, went upstairs and cried. The envelope did arrive about 9 days later. I couldn't open it for 3 weeks. I didn't want to know. Because if I did, I'd have to leave the house and not infect my brothers.
You opened it and thankfully it was negative.
Didn't understand it at first. I had to read it about 50 times. What does it mean? Well, it says O positive. I think that's my blood. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure if the O positive was my blood or the results. But yes, thankfully, it was.
In terms of the hepatitis C, did you tell anyone about the diagnosis other than your immediate family?
The family knew. I threatened my brothers that if they told anyone, I'd kill them. And I never told anyone. I was scared, terrified. I was 18 years old. It was in the news. I knew I'd been ostracised. It's a small community. Everyone knows everyone. No, never told no one.
Once you reached your 20s, you started to feel a bit better, a bit stronger, and things started to improve.
I did. It was literally 17, 18 years of age when I was told. I started picking up a bit. But by the 20s, yes, physically I was stronger. I felt stronger. My memory was still poor. But yes, I definitely felt stronger. I was able to do man's work, and more so, I believe. I was a strong lad, and it's coming back to me, and I felt very fit. I was socialising a lot. I socialised probably more than I should have because I didn't think I had long. So I did socialise a lot more, and yes, I did feel really, really good, really good.
And you think that's probably when you were clearing the virus?
I believe that's when, yes, I believe that's as the virus is being fought, I was getting better, yes. When
were you told that you'd cleared the virus?
I was 23 years of age, and again, done a blood test thing, doom and gloom, here we go, what's he going to say today? Going to the doctor, and Dr. Craig again, and he says, right, Miss Roberts, well, I've got a bit of news for you today. I said, well, have you? She goes, I don't know how you've done it, but it's, we can't find it. I said, what? Find what? I said, your Hep C. It's untraceable. He said, you always have the antibody in the system, but well, the good news is they think you're okay. You're going to be okay. I went, okay, thank you. And that was that.
You applied to the Skipton Fund.
I did. I'd seen it in the newspapers about I wasn't alone anymore. I found out the Penrose inquiry. And I read it in my paper. I wasn't the big paper reader, but this headline caught me. I don't know how I ended up reading it. And I went, hang on, there's a thing called a Penrose inquiry. There's other victims who were infected. And I think it had a mention about the Skipton Fund. I went, well, that's me. I was infected. So I think the next time I see my doctor, I asked him about this Skipton Fund, and he said, well, no, you're fine. Look at you. You're fine. I said, yeah, but I was one of those infected, wasn't I? He goes, well, yeah, but I don't think you'll get it. But it says I should. And I didn't get a good endorsement from him, that's for certain. But I filled it out myself, the majority of it. I don't think he did a lot to it, and he sent it off and refused.
The application was refused, and that was because you had no proof that you'd had hepatitis C for a sufficient length of time, because there weren't any records available.
The records, yes, for some reason, I had a folder in the hospital, and it was like this. And it's gone down to that. And I think when I got rejected, I asked for my records. I paid the money to get them. And when it came back and I went through them, it was just missing. Absolutely missing. I went, where's it to? Where's these operations that I had? Where's the treatments I had? Where's all these tests? I've been tested every 3 months. There's no tests. Where are they? But that's before I knew you could get help to look for records or how to ask officially for records. I just got sent what they decided to send me, and it was not there. It was just missing.
And you've also applied to EIBSS and been refused there as well?
Yeah, I'd done the Skipton twice, got rejected. One on it was you didn't have it bad enough, and one you didn't have it long enough, was their excuses, I believe. I just remember those two bits. And then EBS. I only applied for EBS when this inquiry started. And found out about it, and speaking to the other victims, I found out I am a victim. And they said, oh, you're definitely eligible, you're definitely eligible. I said, okay, I'll apply again. I did majority of the work myself, tried to get the endorsement from the blood doctors, who did a terrible endorsement, absolutely shocking. Again, we still had these missing records, including the GP, which was even worse. Massive, like the hospital has got sporadic bits. The GP was just completely missing that period of my life. Sent it off. Thought it hit the criteria, because the criteria was you only had to be infected originally, and refusal. I went, why? How? They said they want a PCR test. I went, PCR test, great. Yeah, refused me, and it hurt. It hurt really badly. But it said you've got a chance of appeal, so I think I waited a bit. I think COVID happened, so I had more time to put the appeal in. And this time I went for everything I could find. I asked for endorsements from the Hep C Trust, who was great. Haemophilia Society, again, they helped. They gave me endorsements. Professor Graham Foster, I spoke to him quite a few times on phone and email, and he said, yes, I do believe you self-cleared later than the time that I just give, 6 months. I did American studies on mortality rate of people that self-cleared. I got a statement of my father under oath, and I got every single thing I could think of, and again rejected, and this time it hurt. They rejected me, and I went dark for 3 weeks. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to speak to anyone. I nearly quit the inquiry. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a liar, a fraud, and they was trying to tell me I made it all up. And that hurt. That really hurt me. I'm a big lad, but that broke me.
Thank you. Marlene. In 1986, 1987, you needed to have a hysterectomy. And you had a discussion with the surgeon before the operation about whether you'd need a transfusion during the surgery. What were you told by him?
Well, I was working in health at that time as a radiographer, and we were very aware of HIV. So I asked if I could donate my own blood in case it was needed because of the surgery. And the surgeon laughed at me and said, no, you haven't got enough blood for yourself, you know, this is why you need it done. However, it's highly unlikely you'll need it, and if you do, the blood we have here is safe. That was it.
You were admitted to hospital in February 1987
Yes.
to have the surgery, but after the operation you hemorrhaged.
Yes.
What do you know about what happened next?
Well, I was hemorrhaging very badly. It turns out that there was quite a large area, a relatively large area that was unsutured in theatre, and that's where I was hemorrhaging from. And I needed further emergency surgery, and I needed blood. I was being given emergency fluids under pressure, but obviously still hemorrhaging very badly. My blood pressure was very, very low, and time was ticking away. So when they operated, they also gave me some blood.
Were you ever told how many units you were given?
At the time, no, I wasn't.
How did you come to find out that you'd been infected with hepatitis C?
I got a letter from, I think it was the Blood Transfusion Service, informing me that I had been infected by hepatitis C as a result of the blood transfusion, the transfused blood that was tested and found to be positive.
So I think your recollection is the letter suggested that the donor who donated the blood had now been identified as hepatitis C
Yes.
positive.
Yes.
So it was perhaps part of the look back exercise.
Possibly, yes.
And at that point you made an appointment with your GP?
Yes.
And had a blood test. And what were you told then?
It was inconclusive at that time, I was told, and I was told I would need a liver biopsy to make a final decision, which I eventually had.
And after that biopsy, you were then told that you had been infected, but had cleared it?
Yes.
And what information were you told about what that meant?
Not a lot, really. Like most people, for most things these days, I was given the leaflet, which didn't really tell me any more than I knew anyway. I was also told, I was also asked when I'd had malaria, and I said, I haven't. They said, you have. And I then described what I thought was just a simple viral illness, but I'd been very ill with it. I wasn't able to get out of bed, really. I was fluctuating rapidly between absolutely burning up and pouring sweat and being really cold, excuse me, ice cold, shaking with what's known as rigors, and just fluctuating between the two. This went on for 3 weeks, and he just said, that's malaria. And I said, well, I've not been to a malarial area. And we talked about the areas I'd holidayed, and said, no, there's nothing there. So I said, well, where's that come from? And he just kind of shook his head and said, well, that's another can of worms, isn't it?
And in terms of the hepatitis C, in relation to the risks that the infection might pose, what were you advised?
I was told that I'd cleared it, which was brilliant, so I was okay. However, I had to pretty much act as though I was Hep C positive. So I had to inform anyone who was going to do any invasive procedure on me, like taking blood, operating on me, doing anything at all. I had to be cautious in terms of sexual activity. I had to use protection, inform people.
And did they explain to you why that was necessary if you had cleared the virus? Was there any discussion about that with you?
They couldn't really answer that. They just said, just better err on the side of caution.
After the diagnosis, what was the impact of that on your mental well-being?
Not too good, really, to be perfectly honest. I felt as though I had something horrible crawling around my body. Still do at times. It's not a nice feeling. It makes you feel violated, I suppose, without sounding too dramatic. Yeah.
And you had a young family at the time.
Yes, I did.
And did that cause that anxiety for you?
Yes, because nobody could really answer the questions as to whether I would be okay or not. And yeah, I had 2 young children. They were probably, 6 and 13 at the time. I had a lot of time that they were going to need a mum. And I didn't know if I was going to be there.
And in terms of your physical health, what's that been like?
It deteriorated quite a lot, and I've been subsequently diagnosed with various autoimmune conditions, the first one being fibromyalgia. That just deteriorates year on year and causes a lot of problems. It's a syndrome of very many symptoms, probably hundreds of symptoms. I've also been diagnosed with Sjogren's disease, which is another autoimmune, and more recently a skin condition called pityriasis lichenoides, which is a bit strange because it's a condition that in itself is rare, but when it does hit, it tends to hit juvenile males, not somebody my age as a female. And again, it's just another autoimmune thing, which it's quite debilitating. All of it together is quite debilitating.
And you've spoken in your statement particularly of the fatigue and the memory problems and the joint pain that you've suffered.
The muscle pain is, the best way I can describe it is it's almost as if your muscles have a covering. It's almost like the body's cling film. It's almost like the inside of that covering is fine sandpaper, and every time you move, any movement, it hurts. Get flares. When I first started with it, I used to get a flare about once a month, and it would probably last a day. I now tend to get one a week, and they're more like 3 days by the time they've cleared. Memory problems. They call it fibro fog, and it's like some days, you struggle to remember your own name. It's ridiculous. You laugh it off, but it isn't funny. The fatigue is absolutely crushing. You can't push through it. It's a fatigue that you have to experience to really understand. It just stops you doing anything. And some days, again, it sounds dramatic, but you have to be careful sort of what you're eating, because the effort of lifting a knife and fork or a spoon is just too much. It's horrible.
What have you been told by the rheumatologists about the fibromyalgia and your hepatitis C?
I've moved house a few times, so I've seen various rheumatologists, and one of the first questions is, have you been exposed to hepatitis C? Or hepatitis generally. Hepatitis C is brought up because there does appear to be some kind of link, so I'm told, and so I've read.
So despite having cleared it, there's still a question when you meet the rheumatologists of whether there is a connection between fibromyalgia and hepatitis C.
And autoimmune conditions in general.
Your marriage broke down in 2004, and what's the impact of the hepatitis C been on subsequent relationships?
Quite poor, really. It has reared its head and has brought some potential relationships to an end.
And I think in your statement you say that's because there's that difficult conversation that has to be had.
Absolutely.
About the fact that although you've cleared, you've been advised you've got to
be
explain.
honest with people, yeah.
And in terms of your working life, what's the effect been on that?
It has had quite an impact. I'm a sort of person who will try to just get on with things. But, yes, I changed careers from being a radiographer to a chiropodist. Chiropody I chose because at the time I retrained, I realised I had the fibromyalgia. Didn't know a lot about it at that time, so when I chose another career, I chose one which, if I needed to, I could do from a wheelchair. I didn't realise the whole body impact of it at all. It has shortened that career dramatically and made the actual working of it very difficult. For example, my last few working years up to retirement I got down to 2 days a week, and that was a struggle. And so I would work, I'd do the morning, I'd see perhaps 4 patients, and then I'd have a long lunch break, which meant that I would just go and get into bed, set my alarm, and have a sleep so I could get through the afternoon. And then after the afternoon, it's like ready meal for tea, because I couldn't have prepped and made a meal. And it reduced my earning capacity. It's definitely shortened my career by a lot. So I've had to give up.
And in terms of the financial assistance schemes, you haven't applied to them?
I applied to the Skipton Fund when I found out about it, and was turned down. And I haven't applied for anything since, because when I read the criteria for application, we're just not a part of that.
Thank you. Stephen, you have mild haemophilia A,
That's correct.
and that was diagnosed in about 1978.
Yes.
And at that point, you were treated on average about 4 or 5 times a year at Lewisham Hospital initially.
That's right, yeah.
And you know that you received Factor VIII in October 1979 to treat a particular bleed.
Yeah, well, it was told to me it was a bleed at the time, yeah, 1979.
And it was a bleed in your left hip.
That's right.
But otherwise, I think you're unsure whether you received cryoprecipitate or when you received Factor VIII and how that balance flowed through your treatment.
What, from 1978?
Yeah.
I've received treatment in 1979 for the hip. I don't know if I'd had any prior to that.
Yeah. Can you tell us what your health, your physical health was like during your teenage years?
During primary school, it was awkward just because of haemophilia. I was treated different. Like you can't play the sports. You have to be careful in PE. In fact, the only sport they would allow me to do was swimming. It wasn't until I got to secondary school that I was tired all the time. I was coming home, I was just collapsing on the sofa, and it just got to the extent that my mum actually thought I was on drugs because I was just falling asleep all the time. I was collapsing at school. Twice this happened in secondary school, and the teachers said, "Oh, you just fainted," and I listened to them. I believed what they were telling me. There was another time I was on the train to visit me auntie in Strood, and again collapsed on the train. Passengers took me off the train and left me on the platform. Again, in secondary school, I wasn't allowed to do any sports at all.
And in terms of those times when you collapsed, did you see your GP about them at all?
Never see the GP. The only time I would have seen my GP as a child was for vaccinations, or unless there was something that was quite obviously wrong, like an ear infection, or maybe you've got chicken pox. That's it. I never really see my GP. It was hospital for everything.
Did you mention the collapses to the haematologists at all?
No, because I assumed they were due to faints. I'd never fainted before in my life throughout primary school. It wasn't until I got to secondary school this extreme tiredness just hit me and I was collapsing.
How did you come to find out that you'd been infected with hepatitis C?
It would have been in the late 80s, and it wasn't. We didn't just receive a letter and we was told. It was more vague than that. It was. They spoke about it when you got to the hospital, but it was. You've been infected with hepatitis, or you've come into contact with hepatitis C. Now, it's not causing you any problems at the moment. It's just something you get, something you need to deal with, and that was it. There was no information, no leaflets, nothing at all.
I think your recollection is that it was in about 1992 that you got that initial letter, maybe a little bit earlier.
1992 was when I was more aware of what I'd received. Yeah, because I think I got a leaflet at that time to explain the symptoms of hepatitis C and what that actually means. But there was never any other advice, there was no support, nothing. It was just, oh, right, and that was it. But because I've been told that you don't worry about them things, we didn't. We got on with our lives.
Then in 1996, you went to ask doctors about your hepatitis.
That's right.
And you saw a haemophilia nurse.
Yes.
Why did you go to ask them about it at that point?
I wanted confirmation. I was with my girlfriend at the time, and I told her, and she didn't understand. I couldn't explain it, so we wanted confirmation. We booked to see Lewisham Hospital, and what they'd done was they couldn't give me the confirmation. They had to test me. I think it was over a period of 6 to 12 months, regular intervals. I had to have various different tests. I was told to use barrier methods of contraception. And eventually they gave me or what they told me wasn't the all clear. They said, yes, you've come into contact with hepatitis C. The virus is below our detectable limits. So what does that mean? Does that mean that I've got it or I haven't got it? All it meant was it's below what we can detect for, and all the time it remains at that level, it's not a problem.
And in your statement, you've described the nurses as saying that you had natural immunity and that you should consider yourself very lucky.
That was, yeah, after speaking to the haemophilia nurse, yeah, you effectively got immunity against hepatitis C. I've been vaccinated against hepatitis A, vaccinated against hepatitis B. You should consider yourself very lucky, and I didn't consider myself lucky.
And why was that? After you were married, you applied for some life insurance in about 1997. What happened with those applications?
I applied for life insurance, and they asked me a question if I'd ever had a test for hepatitis C, and I'd never been asked that on previous occasions for any sort of insurances, and it just took me back a bit. So I had to be honest. I said yes, I have, and as a result, they refused me my life insurance.
And on the application form, were you able to make clear that you had cleared it?
No, it was just a tick box. Have you been infected or have you been tested? Yes, I have. That was it. There was no other box for putting a reason down. That's it.
In about 2000, you moved to Cambridgeshire and transferred your care from Lewisham to Addenbrooke's.
That's correct.
and you sought your records from Lewisham Hospital in about 2003.
That's right.
What did you discover was missing when you obtained the records?
I was missing, I think it was from about 1979 to 1985 of all my microbiology blood results. So there's no liver function test results, no blood results, anything during that period. And being a haemophiliac under Lewisham, we were tested or had blood tests taken every year under the annual review. So they were all taken, but none in my medical records at all.
In 2004, your application to the Skipton Fund was refused. Do you recall what the reason for the refusal was?
The first time I applied for Skipton, I filled out the form, sent it off. It was refused because I didn't meet the criteria. I applied again, and this time I got help from a lot of people. I went to various organisations, got letters of support. The doctor at the time from Lewisham, she wrote me letters. I had Haemophilia Society. I had, I want to say contaminated blood.
It was the Hepatitis C
organisation.
Trust, I think.
That's right, yeah, Hepatitis C Trust. There was another one as well, but I got as many people as I could to write letters of support. I even had a solicitor fighting my case for me. He felt so strongly he'd done it free of charge. It was not a no-win, no-fee. It was free of charge, and I thought, I've got this time, great, and sent it all off. Refused. It went to appeal, and again it was refused on the because I wasn't meeting our criteria. And again, it said on the reason why I was refused that I should consider myself lucky.
When, in terms of the letter from your haematologist, I think it'd be helpful to put that up so that we can look at it. The reference is COLL 5010, and I think it's page 45 that we want. Please, Lawrence. And it's just picking up from the third paragraph, and I'm going to read quite a chunk of it out, Stephen. Mr. Towsey first received factor VIII in 1979 for 7 days. This was in the context of a bleed in one of his hips. His notes are unfortunately incomplete in that they no longer contain records of his early review visits, and that none of the biochemical screenings he would have undergone in the early 1980s are in his notes. There is a period, therefore, between 1979 and 1985 when it is likely that Mr. Towsey had a transaminitis, but we are not in a position to prove this, or indeed disprove that he had an active hepatitis C infection at the time. Regular records of biochemical screening in the form of a summary sheet are not available until 1985 and have been normal since, noting that our results in Lewisham stop in 2000 when his care was transferred to Addenbrooke's. Mr. Towsey was first noted to be hepatitis C antibody positive in 1992, and his first PCR result was in 1995 and negative. In addition, and even though his hepatitis C PCR has been undetectable on the 4 occasions when it was tested, most recently in 1999, there is no guarantee that the 15% or so of hepatitis C patients who become PCR undetectable without undergoing any treatment will never reactivate. There is certainly evidence, however, that some 5% or so of hepatitis C positive patients who become PCR undetectable after treatment will reactivate. Given that Mr. Towsey first became aware of his hepatitis C status in 1992, there were at least 3 years during which he had no reassuring information in the form of negative PCR, as the technology was not available. The psychological distress caused to Mr. Towsey under the circumstances has been considerable, given his knowledge of his own infection by the same or similar agent. I would therefore recommend Mr. Towsey very strongly for compensation under the Skipton Fund scheme. That was the letter that was provided by the Lewisham consultant.
That's correct.
And despite that letter, your applications were still refused.
Still refused.
Wayne, you have severe haemophilia A.
Yep.
And you were generally treated at Nottingham Hospital.
Yeah.
And that was with a variety of factor VIII products and cryoprecipitate in the 1980s and early 90s.
Yeah.
When were you told that you had contracted hepatitis C?
I can't remember. Probably 12, 13, maybe 14. It's around about that age. So.
And do you recall how you were told?
Yeah, I was. We'd gone to the hospital, I think, just for a routine appointment because I was there every like 3 months to 6 months, and we were waiting outside in the corridor, and one of the nurses came out, and I think my mum asked, why are we here today? Because I don't think it's normal, and she said, oh, it's because Wayne's got Hep C, and we were just told in a corridor because the room. You'd walk through one of the main corridors and there was just chairs outside, and then you'd go and see the doctors into the main bit, and we were just sat waiting there, and people walking past, and a random nurse just kind of just told us off the cuff, and then we went in to see the doctor. So.
And what was your mum's reaction to that manner of being told?
Shock, I think. Start with, I mean, for me, I didn't really understand it at the time. We went in to see the doctor. They kind of explained it a little bit more. In vague terms, but then I can just remember we left, got in the car. My mum was really emotional, and then we drove home to find my dad because my dad was working. He was a window cleaner at the time, so he was somewhere in the around. So we drove around trying to find where he would be working, and then my mum went and told my dad. So. Not a nice day, but...
What was your mum advised about precautions you needed to take in light of your infection?
We needed to make sure all of my toothbrushes and toiletries and stuff like that were in a second bathroom. They asked if do we have a second bathroom, and we're like, yeah, we've got a main bathroom and my mum and dad had got an ensuite. They're like, well, can you separate everything from everybody else in the family? Don't want to contact toothbrushes, especially with my brothers or anything like that, and to separate everything and keep them all.
Did anyone outside of the immediate family know that you had hepatitis
No,
C?
we were told, we were told never to mention it in front of anybody. It was never mentioned really in front of my brother again for a long time, and then we were told not to tell anybody. So, yeah, we didn't and I didn't either.
Sorry, I missed that.
I didn't either. It was one of those things that we just didn't tell people about or speak about. It's a small village where we lived, and everything that had occurred with with AIDS appearing and stigma, it's like didn't want that to come out as well with the Hep C. So, yeah, didn't mention it.
When you were a teenager, can you describe what your health was like?
Not good. Very similar to how everybody else has been describing it. And it was probably when I was more getting into like 11, 12 is when it really started, just fatigue, not just feeling unwell. I had my haemophilia, which is, I had days where I had bleeds and I was unwell, and I know what that feels like. It's not nice, it's horrible, but then I'd wake up and bleed's gone, yay, but then you're just feeling horrible. Just the best way of describing it is I recently got COVID and I was feeling not very good through COVID, drained, and that was pretty much how it was like most days when for those couple of years. It was just getting up, no energy, washed out. It's just hard, and it's just really hard to get motivated to do anything because I just didn't have the energy, just didn't feel very well. I was jaundiced quite a lot, younger than my teenage years as well. It's very similar to how everybody else has described it, really.
I want to just look through 3 of your medical records and then I'll ask you about them, if I may. COLL 5012, if we can start with that, please. We see the date is the 27th of July 1995, and if we go down to the middle of the page, we have this note. Main complaint is of recurrent episodes fatigue, listlessness, disinterest, occasional nausea, vomited once only, no major abdominal pain, appetite maintained, about once a month, stays in bed or around the house, no weight loss, stays off school 1 to 2 days. Mum, more concerned about this than Wayne is, also think he looks too pale, at the same time says prophylaxis allows him to be more active. And then if we could turn to COLL 5013, please. This is a letter from we can see on the top right corner that the clinic was held on the 24th of August 1995, although the letter is dated the 30th of August. And if we go down to the third paragraph, Wayne's main complaint was of recurrent episodes of fatigue and listlessness. These are occasionally accompanied by nausea, but no vomiting. He has no abdominal pain, his appetite is maintained, and they occur approximately once a month. He does, however, stay off school for a day or two when they occur. I must confess I got the impression that these were concerning his mother far more than Wayne, but she is obviously concerned lest it be related to his hepatitis C status. And then COLL 5011, please. A clinic note from the 22nd of February 1996. And if we go down to the third point, thank you. Back to having lots of time off school, only 1 full week at school since Christmas, due to fatigue, lethargy, headaches, nausea, appetite normal, non-specific mid-abdominal discomfort, worse when hungry. Do those notes, Wayne, accord with your recollection of how you felt during your teenage years?
Pretty much, yes.
And in terms of the references to your mum being more concerned than you, what's your kind of perspective on that?
Yeah, my mum was worried, but more than me is because my way of dealing with my entire life and my haemophilia is I'm perfectly fine. It's like, I am fine, I've got a bleed, it's fine, that's just, in my own little head, it's me versus my body versus me, so it treats me like crap, I'll treat you like crap, blah, blah, blah. It's like the best way of dealing with it as a kid was to kind of be that way. Yeah, and then not tell anybody really about it, apart from being in pain, I need some treatment, and then you just deal with it, and I'm fine. And I still do it to this day. If somebody asks me, are you okay? I'm fine. And my wife moans at me all the time. She knows me best, and she says she knows when I'm not, and pulls me up on that. But at the time, I used to do that to my mum. I would, if I was really ill, she would know, and I would tell her if I was really ill. But most of the time, I'd be fine. I'd go to the hospital, stuff would be wrong, but I would just say to them, are you okay? Yeah, I'm really good. And I still do it now when I go to the hospital. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. I think I've done it this morning to a bunch of people. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just my natural response. And I'm not, but what's the point in moaning about it? Because it doesn't really achieve much, because that stuff's still going to be there. So, yeah.
And have you talked to your mum at all about her interactions with the clinicians at that point? Yeah,
I always felt my mum, quite a lot of the time, was looked down upon, talked down to, especially. She had me young. She was only 20 when she had me. So a lot of the time when she was dealing with the doctors, she was still young. I mean, she's a lot younger than I am now. And you've been told things by somebody who you're supposed to trust and take everything that they say, and a lot of the time they'd be quite dismissive towards her. It's nothing to worry about, it's fine. He's a typical teenager. My mum's like, but my brother's only 16 months older than me. She knows what a typical teenager's like. My brother is super fit, he's been in the army 22 years, he's that level of fitness. I'm not, and I would have, they'd be like, you've just got normal teenagers, he's just lazy, he's tired. It's like, no, that's what Clinton's can be like, but Wayne is another level of, yeah.
And what was the impact of you on you mentally of being told that you had hepatitis C?
Not great. I probably dealt with it, and I still deal with it. I was just literally putting everything in a box in my own little head and not dealing with it and ignoring it and going, I'm fine, everything's fine. Because what else could I do? I couldn't do anything about it. I could deal with my bleeds by having my factor, try and not injure myself or anything like that with the Hep C. I couldn't do anything about that, so it's just try and stick it in a box and leave it there. And I've only just started to open that box lately in the last few years, so yeah, so not great, but.
And how did you come to find out that you had cleared the infection?
I can't remember my exact age, but I'd have been in my late teens, maybe 17-ish. I'd started going to the hospital on my own, and it was due to the fact that I'd got a girlfriend at the time, and you want to be more active. So I think I'd asked them about that, and then the response was, "Oh, no, you don't have to worry about that. You cleared that ages ago. It's fine. It's gone. Don't have to worry about it." Like, all right. So you're this and you're that. You're PCR positive. I can't remember which way around it is. So then I came home and mentioned it to mum and dad, and told me I'm fine with that. And like, did you get any more information? I'm like, maybe I need to go back. I'm 17. I'm an idiot. If somebody tells you you've cleared it, like, yay. But I didn't ask the questions that I would have asked if my mum and dad had been there. And I think I went back for another meeting with my mum and dad, and we asked more questions, because as a typical teenager, you only ask questions.
And do you recall that second meeting, what you were told about having cleared?
No, I can't remember that second meeting. I don't know if we did go back for another one at all. I just remember being told, and it being like, oh, right, something you don't have to worry about that. You cleared it ages ago. Why are you whittling?
You applied to the Skipton Fund.
I never applied.
Oh, apologies.
So when I went to university, I transferred when I was about 21, 22 to Sheffield, and the Professor Macris there, when I first moved there and met him, he says, are you aware of this? I was like, no. So he's like, yeah, this is the Skipton Fund, and from looking at your notes, you should be eligible for this. So he was like, I'll look into it, I'll go through all your notes, I'll get all the relevant stuff, and we'll send it off and apply for it. And then I was like quite excited. I think I can remember ringing mum and dad about it, because I was just about to finish uni. I thought, that's a bit of money, I can put it down as a deposit on a house or a flat. I can remember getting really excited, and then the next time I saw them a few months later, they were, Mike said, I've been through all your notes, and there's not enough for you to meet the criteria, so there's just no point as applying, because you just don't, there's so many medical notes missing, you won't pass, so there's no point.
But you have applied to the EIBSS.
So I have, and I was awarded that in December
2020.
2020, thank you.
Can you tell us how you came to apply to the EIBSS?
Yes, so my social worker at the time, I was reapplying for my PIP. So I'd contacted my social worker at the hospital, and then she said, oh, by the way, are you aware of the inquiry? I was like, I'm vaguely aware of it. She says, also, are you aware of the new EIB system? I was like, nope. She's like, would you be willing to go through that if we take you on as a test case, to go through the EIBs, and we'll get as much information as possible, and we'll see if we can get that one. I was like, okay. So that took a long time. Eventually, with the help of my social worker, and then Carol, one of the nurses there, and then Professor Macris, I think, wrote a very strong letter saying, all these things that happened, these notes are missing, but there's no way you would have done my liver biopsy or anything like that without having some liver tests that were showing something wrong. So we do think like Wayne qualifies for that. So I was awarded it in December 2020.
So I'm about to move on to a more thematic discussion, but I wonder whether now is a good time to take our morning break, and then we can return for those themes after our break.
Yes, well, we've heard the personal stories of each and the general discussion that of the type that we had yesterday can follow at 11:30. So 11:30.